So President Obama has former alumni that are calling on the president to leverage his influence for a Gaza ceasefire. We're going to be talking about that today. I'm joined here by my co-host slash guest for the evening, Kiki May. Thanks for joining me with this one. This is a
Thanks for
piece
having
out
me.
of the oh yeah, this is a piece out of the Intercept. We're going to put this up on the screen really quickly here, where more than 130 former Obama campaign staffers and political appointees are urging the ex-president to push for a ceasefire. This came out of a letter last week. 133 members did ask him to, quote unquote, leverage his influence, brokering the release of Israeli hostages and Palestinian civilians, and setting a path for collective peace. In an essay 3 weeks ago, President Obama had reiterated his support for Israel to defend itself against Hamas, but also cautioned how the country would pursue the goal, noting that already Israel's bombing that had killed and displaced thousands of Palestinians, including children in Gaza. He stressed acknowledging that Palestinians have also lived in disputed territories for generations, that many of them were not only displaced when Israel was formed, but continued to be forcibly displaced by a settler movement that too often has received tacit or explicit support from the Israeli government. The Palestinian leaders who have been willing to make concessions for a two-state solution have often had too little to show for their efforts, and it is impossible for people of goodwill to champion Palestinian rights and oppose certain Israeli government policies in the West Bank and Gaza without being anti-Semitic. Now, a Valentina Parita, a former deputy director of Hispanic media in the White House, said, "I joined and devoted my youth to the Obama Biden administration because of the courage it inspired in me." And she went on to further say that, some of her colleagues have remained fearful or hesitant to voice their opinion, saying it felt like the spirit of courage had been replaced with one of complacency and fear. "I don't want to live my life that way," she added. Kiki, what was your reaction when you first came across this story? And what do you think President Obama should do?
When I first read just even the headline, I was depressed by it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
So to think about that Obama needs to be leaned on at all, pressured into supporting a ceasefire doesn't, sit well in terms of the picture that we have painted for him, right? Which is, again, you mentioned like courage and justice was sort
yeah,
of, the theme of his campaign, change, hope, and the fact that he hasn't come out to call for a ceasefire seems like a lack of courage and not a bent
yeah.
toward justice. The other thing I think is interesting, as I read the article, is that they categorize Obama as someone who is possibly more um, open to the Palestinian cause because he went to two speeches well, no, he went to one speech by Edward Said, and who wrote the book Orientalism, and as somebody that, was a political science student, cultural studies student, that's like required reading. So he went to a speech, and then he went to Rashid Khalid's going away party. So again, another professor, right? And that's why they're saying, oh, he's open to Palestinian people because he went to these like two events. And Rashid Khalid has since said that they've had a falling out because they don't agree,
Mm.
which I think is quite interesting that they haven't spoken. So, I think the whole thing just made me feel kind of gross, to be honest, that it's we're at this space in time where like that is like the lowest bar possible. Oh, he like went to some events where there were Palestinian people. And even when he did that, the ADL spokesman at the time, who's not their current, I don't think it was their current CEO or spokesperson, but said, "Oh, we're concerned that Obama went to an Arab event." What? Like,
God.
so that's we're very low, like bottom of the barrel stuff going on right now. And again, I just think the fact that folks had to actually like lean on him to do this is sad. And given what he's said in the past, given his own actions in the past in terms of, being proud of his record of killing people at their own weddings.
Oh God.
Doesn't really seem like he's gonna be necessarily open to pushing for this. And let's say he did, like, what, he has a chat with Joe Biden and Joe's gonna change his mind suddenly? I don't know.
I was having a very similar reaction, truthfully speaking. You know, for me, I kind of stepped out of politics for a little while in my 20s after I came to the realization that Barack Obama wasn't exactly who I thought that he was. Because I know when my first election that I was able to vote in was the 2008 election. Voted for Barack Obama. I was so excited when he got elected. And, I wasn't super engaged in politics at the time, like most people who are that young are not. And then went through my first, couple of years of college, and I, was like checking back in, occasionally here and there with politics. Came across just like things that just weren't really adding up for me, like before the 2012 election. And I got really disillusioned with President Obama. And I ended up just not voting in the 2012 election at all. I just got really discouraged that he didn't turn out to be the person who I thought he was going to be. And I didn't really check back in with politics as a whole until Bernie Sanders came onto the scene in 2015, and that kind of reinvigorated me a little bit. And even with all of that being said, there is still always a part of me that's always felt some kind of a positive way about President Obama. I know what he's done, especially, going into details about what's happening with all the drone strikes that have happened abroad during his presidency. And even with that being said, there's still some part of me that weirdly, I just can't shake a positive attachment to him. But yeah, like you said, it's strange that he should have to be even pushed in this way in general, but it also just shows the absolute capture that both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party seems to find themselves when it comes to their relationship with the nation of Israel. To this day, I still don't understand it. I truthfully don't. It almost feels like fear half the time. Like they're afraid to criticize the state of Israel. Like they're afraid to criticize the government of Israel. And I want to say that specifically because too often when we're having these conversations, people will say like, "Oh, you're being anti-Semitic," like because there are bad actors out there who want to kind of conflate the idea that criticizing the government of Israel is criticizing Judaism or criticizing Jewish people. Or no, we were talking about the government. Just wanted to again just lay that out there. The government of Israel. This should not be controversial. I keep saying that very plainly on my on Instagram, like time and time again, because I feel like you can get lost in a lot of details when it comes to what's happening over in Gaza, what's happening in the West Bank. But I just want to make things very simplistic for people when they come to like check in with something that I'm saying online. There is nothing controversial about calling for a ceasefire. There's nothing when you truly think about it. We're talking about like, hey, maybe you should stop killing people. How is that controversial? There is no way you could paint that as being controversial unless you are, in my personal opinion, truly deranged. So it is very hard for me to sit there and see that President Obama, has to be pushed and then still won't do it. To something that you mentioned earlier, though, would him speaking out push President Biden? I think it would make his seat very hot because Barack
Mm.
Obama is still the most I mean, maybe besides Bernie Sanders and honestly, maybe even more so, he's still the most popular Democrat in America. So if Barack Obama were to come out publicly and take a position like that, President Biden would be in a very, very, very uncomfortable position, especially with where the polls are at. We just had an NBC poll come out recently that showed Donald Trump beating Joe Biden for the first time ever in any poll that they've ever conducted. He's
Mhm.
in a tough spot right now. So yes, I think an Obama coming out and calling for a ceasefire would be a massive deal for the movement overall to try to end the violence over in Gaza right now.
Yeah, you have a valid point. I'm gonna say that I am cynical in terms of you would think that all of the pressure from the citizens of the United States, from the citizens of the world at this point, would have had some influence. And yet you see Joe Biden, like when he's caught walking from the plane to somewhere and journalists talk to him and it's like, is there a possibility for a ceasefire? And he's like, absolutely not, 100% no. Like that definitive about it, which
Right.
again, well, makes me it's gross. But the other thing I am thinking about too, in terms of like why the United States and its political leaders, there seems to be like a chokehold on them in terms of coming out to critique the Israeli government. Obviously, there's all of the conversations about the resources in the area, the fact that Israel gives them intelligence that they don't otherwise have. There's all these sort of practical considerations that I'm sure that they're thinking about, right? But I feel like it's also tied up in the story of or the narrative of Israel is so much like the American narrative in terms of, oh, Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East, and America, a shining city upon a hill among a bunch of like savages. And it's if you start to peel back the layers of what's going on in Israel, you might as well be peeling them back here too. So it's kind of like you're holding up a mirror to who we are as a nation,
Yeah.
which, in times of crisis, everybody loves to say, this is not who America is. It absolutely is. Like all the terrible shit we do, that's us. That's it. Our history is of violent colonial settler, imperialist horribleness. But the other thing too is that we have to think about not only like the pressure from lobbying groups like APAC, but also the Anti-Defamation League is not a civil rights organization. It is effectively a pro-Israel lobby. And so they come out here and they get to decide. The ADL as an organization is the one deciding what constitutes anti-Semitism, what constitutes hate speech. And so since they are very much invested in the Israeli state, they are conflating critique of the Israeli government with anti-Semitism because that is a way to shield the Israeli government from critique. Um, and so, and we've endorsed their given definition. Even and similarly to how we call Hamas a terrorist organization when that's also not unilaterally agreed about. We've taken very strong positions that I feel like it's hard to like walk back now, given not only the money but just like the pressure. And the other piece I think is just that you know this is how it's always been. Like there's some sort of momentum of we're just always in this unending cycle of violence. And there really is. There's always just going to be the Middle East issue, and there's no sort of reimagining of what could be possible there. It's just like this is how it is, and it helps us continue to paint those folks as others, and it's all tied up in that conversation. So I don't know. I hate to again be cynical, but I feel like there's a lot to be cynical about these days.
There's definitely a lot to be cynical about. And, kind of to balance it out a little bit, I will provide some of the hope that I will hope
Yes,
penetrates
go for
through
it.
some of our cynicism here. You know, I will say, I'm going to put this up on the screen really quickly here. This is a piece out of NBC News. It shows that Biden administration staff have signed an open letter demanding a ceasefire in the war over in Gaza. And also, this is coming out of Axios. This is it says scoop here. Internal State Department memo blasts Biden and U.S. policy on Israel and Hamas war. So I just want to say that, like while it seems like there is a lot of, despair to be going around, to see staffers of Barack Obama, former staffers of Barack Obama, openly like pressuring him in public, please call for a ceasefire. To see that people in Biden's own administration are signing letters saying, please, like sign a ceasefire. To see that people in the State Department are blasting Biden for the policies going on over there. I mean, granted, I haven't been on this earth for a super long time, but I have never seen something like this before. Publicly going after your own administration. Like, typically if we see an administration come under fire, it's from like the opposing political party. Democrats attacking Republicans, Republicans attacking Democrats. And we essentially wash that out of our minds because it's so normal. To see basically your own workers coming after you in public, not in private, but in public, that on top of just the grassroots organizations that we have been seeing pop up all over the country, the march that happened in DC a couple weeks ago, where like tens of thousands, like maybe over 100,000, no one really knows, to be honest with you, but like however many people showed up there, it was an incredible show of support. And it's just not stopping. In the news cycle that we have here in America, it almost feels like there are just some stories that like they get like a lot of attention for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then people just move on to the next story. People are sticking with this. It's really giving me hope. And so I think that if people, just don't give up, keep voicing their opinions, keep speaking out, you're going to see a true test case of how people coming together individually, speaking up, using their platforms online does truly have an effect. The Democratic Party, they are in no position right now to really be hemorrhaging support going into the 2024 election. They
Mhm.
need support. And they are seeing just, I think, just down the ballot kind of just loss of overall enthusiasm, especially amongst younger people who I think the last time I saw a poll that it was like 25% of people under the age of 35 still support Joe Biden. He is getting crushed right now from his unequivocal support to the nation of Israel. So much so
Mhm.
that when they tried to negotiate that 5-day ceasefire just a couple of days ago, which was reported by the by the Washington Post, it
Mhm.
came out afterwards that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that he felt like he didn't really have to accept that deal because Biden's had such public, unequivocal support to his nation that he felt like he was in a position where he didn't have to have any real concessions with the Hamas leadership, where they were trying to broker that deal over in the
Mhm.
nation of Qatar. So Biden's doing this to himself, but the pressure is starting to mount and it's starting to get to him. And I think he's definitely feeling it. And it's worth the continuation on all of our parts.
Yeah, I appreciate you because um hearing you like say it all out loud um gets me going back in the right direction. I think as somebody who's been like deeply enmeshed in all of the stories and posting and making content and all of that, it takes a toll for sure. But
Yes.
I have to agree in terms of, in my lifetime, I have not seen like this level in terms of like demonstrations, like the activity, the continued. I think that's the biggest part that resonated with me, that you said like the continued sustained action in a world where we are very much like 5 minute sound bites. Something happens one day and the next day like nobody is talking about it. The fact that we're continuing this, and I think that's almost entirely due to social media, Instagram, TikTok, like folks being able to connect with Palestinian journalists on the ground, to actually see with their eyes, like firsthand accounts of the things that are going on, I think has been tremendous. And so I'm going to try to remember to stay on the hope train a little more. And I think, I don't know what that quote is about, like despair is the enemy of like resistance or activism or something like that. And like hope is revolutionary. So I got to work on that piece. But I think the only other thing, I wanted to talk about when I read this article that it made me think about was when Obama initially came out, and I don't know what the forum was, but in that forum where he was speaking about, TikTok, you can't do real activism on TikTok, and you'll only get one side of the truth, and all of our hands are dirty and stuff like that. Um, so it's like there's almost, now he has to get over the fact that he initially said those things. And then he wrote like an article that was like a little more, you know, kind, for lack of a more eloquent word, to the Palestinian cause. And now it's like, okay, keep going, and like nudging him in this direction. So I think maybe that does speak to the power of TikTok activism.
Yeah.
But the thing that like bugged me about that initial um statement, or little talk that he gave, was that I feel like it was almost like, not only is he the most popular Democratic president that we've had, and obviously he's known for being good with words, right? So who better to trot out during this time? But I feel like it was like a signal to folks of color to be like, now everybody, you're getting a little too extra, like you're aligning with this cause that we don't like. Here's your like orderly token person of color for you to be like, now. And I've seen like a lot of folks of color talk about this and feeling like even more pissed already, disillusioned to the fact, disillusioned in the sense that you were speaking about, like
Yeah.
I had this expectation and reality did not match it, and then this I heard folks talking about just feeling like it was a manipulation sort of tactic to trot him out. Um, all that is to say that I feel like if he does eventually publicly call for a ceasefire, I think it needs to be like some of the most strongly worded, unequivocal sort of statement that he could make to uh I don't know, again, a lack of a better word, but just like make up for the recent shittiness. So
Yeah.
we can curse here. Um, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like, it's such like a drastic shift in such a small period of time that, again, I don't know. I hope we'll get there soon, but not holding my breath.
Yeah, obviously, as these situations continue to develop, and as things are occurring over there, in Israel, in Gaza, and the West Bank, we'll be continuing to talk about them here on this show. If you like this episode, please go ahead and share it, and we will see you in the next one.